Hi, this is John, and thanks for joining me for my first newsletter quick tip. Today, I thought I would discuss the new Topaz Studio, as there seems to be some confusion as to its function. This, like other companies who are coming out with image editors, is Topaz's first attempt at coming out with a full-fledged editing platform, including editing for raw files. So with Topaz Studio, it can be used as a standalone, it can be accessed via Lightroom, or it can be accessed via Photoshop through the filter menu. Any of those will work. Today, I'm just going to introduce you to dragging and dropping images into the film strip, which is what I've done here. So once I drag images into the film strip, I can click on any one of those and start to process those. But first, let's just take a quick look at the interface. On the left side are looks that are commonly known through most of the Topaz products. So these are looks that someone has developed, and they can be categorized by clicking on the more and finding different things like landscape, glow, and graphic. And let me turn on something to see if we can find these things a little easier. How about that? See if that helps. So if I hover over this and I see more, I can now go down here and search or look by category. So I've hit landscape. These are now landscape presets. And if I click on that preset, it'll simply apply that to this photograph. And what is being applied is over here, the different layers, which I'll talk about in a second. I'm going to go down here and just hit reset for a minute. And then on the right side, we have adjustments that we can make. We have a healing brush, which is new, actually. There's a lens corrections and cropping and so forth. And then there's more under this panel down here as well. Different things that we'll talk about today briefly, precision contrast, and we'll also cover dehaze on a couple of these images. Okay, so how does it work? It is working. These are Fuji RAW files, and I am going to go ahead and click on Basic. Now, these tools are a little different than you would think about them in something like Lightroom or Photoshop. Exposure is going to include other algorithms to make it work in more of an auto exposure type of fashion. And for this image, believe it or not, I'm going to bring that down. Clarity is adding some definition and depth, but it's also adding some contrast at the same time, as you would expect. Shadows should be thought of more as a black point slider, and the highlights should be thought of as a white point slider. And as I bring those up, and then the saturation is true to form, but again, it's got an algorithm built into it that's making it work a little differently. So that's why we don't see a black point slider or a white point slider like we do in a Lightroom product, because these are acting in a different way. And as you can see, pretty quickly we've gone from something that's somewhat flat to looking pretty good. I'm going to turn off this mouse so they can see what's going on better. Before, after, with some adjustments in just the basic adjustment panel. We can dig a little deeper if we'd like to, and we can open up a brightness panel. I've just gone here on the right side so that we can see what the brightness panel will offer us. And that we can do just, this one's pretty much true to form. It's adding contrast and adjusting brightness a little bit. Now we can go down here to find some of those that might not be included in the panel on the right. It gets too crowded, so there's others hidden underneath here, and we might go to something like dehaze. And dehaze is an excellent tool from within Studio. I think it actually works a little better than the dehaze even in Lightroom or the Adobe products. Now, one last little thing to introduce you to here is I've added the dehaze, but if I like what was going on in the foreground, but I really want to dehaze just the background, Studio on each one of these layers that is being created or that I've chosen to create, if I hit the plus sign, it gives me a mask. And then I can mask with either a brush, a spot tool, or a radial type brush, a gradient color based on color, based on luminosity. And then I can adjust any one of those masks here and feather that mask should I want to, invert the mask, reset the mask, or hide it. In this case, let's go ahead and do a gradient, and you'll see that it brings up a gradient with the white is revealing, black is concealing. I can flip these upside down the other way if I want to, and then grab this and move it to a different location, just like you would expect a gradient mask to work. And now I can apply that dehaze only to the background of this photograph if I want to. Okay, that's all I want to cover in a quick tip for this particular image. You can also create presets. And I've gone ahead and created a preset, and this is a little bit of what the left side is all about. So I already showed you that you can see all these different categories to search for looks for, but as you create your own, they'll be stored under this called Mine. And you can see here I've created a Palouse truck preset, and now I can apply that to maybe 3 or 4 of the other images that were photographed in the same light, same conditions, same location, same time of day, and it should get me pretty close. But once again, if you choose, you can go and adjust it further and say, nah, I wish the exposure was a little different, or I wish I didn't have quite as much clarity, or what have you, and you can adjust that. So that's how presets work. And then just real quickly to show you how fast this will work, I can go to my healing brush, I can make the brush smaller, I can come in here and I can get rid of that bug, make this brush a little bit smaller yet, get rid of this bug down here. Whoops, didn't quite get rid of him. There we go. That gets rid of it. Now turn that off. Now I can come into my basic panel as I showed you before. I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit, clarity up a little bit, shadows down, highlights up, and then to bring back all that color that we're missing, all I have to do is pull this saturation slider. So as you can see, I think this is a good example. It works a bit differently than Lightroom does or other editors do. It's not quite the same, so you'll have to play a little bit to learn what's going on here, but I like what's going on there. Now what I wanted to introduce you to, well, actually let's do one more. Let's go to brightness, bring the brightness down just a little bit because that'll help with the black background. There we go. There are creative tools, things like smudge will do something like this and cause you to have these cool artistic type of looks. And then included with each layer is, as you would expect, an opacity slider. So now just for this smudge layer, I can choose to blend back in the underlying layers so that it's not quite so strong of an effect. And you also have blend modes, which are going to do different things, and you can see what they do as you hover over them. And you can play with those. Each one of those is going to create a different look. That's all I think I wanted to cover today. As I move forward with quick tips, I am open to your suggestions as to things that you might like to see covered in the quick tip newsletters. Thanks for joining me. See you next month.